I guess this is the best UI that we can use to talk about this, right? Oh, this is kind of cool. So, okay, couple of things. Chapter 39 critique, right? Chapter 39 react critique. Okay, quick 39 reaction recap and critique overview, whatever. I thought the story events itself were fine. I think they should have had built-in intermissions every, 5 stages. Every 5 stages, they should have just, like, took you out as, like, a pause point and let you go back in. So that you have, like, a built-in intermission phase. I felt like there were a lot of missed opportunities for good combat. There was a little bit, like, fodder combat in the beginning. Sure, that's fine. But I really feel like even if we had scripted mini-boss battles, it would be nice. If the main antagonist doesn't have animations yet, they could have pulled, like, Pisacha. They could have just used a generic enemy model. And just, something with 2 or 3 life bars. Yeah, Archharmit. 7+ hours of just sitting down grinding dialogue. That is not Honkai Impact 3rd. That was not the core of what made Honkai Impact 3rd fun. Like, it's what Honkai Impact 3rd has become in the present state, and it's not fun. Story feels like a chore. And you could even see a little bit of this during the Project Stigma finality arc. But even during that arc, we had a bit more fighting. Yeah, that analogy's a bit lost on me, but I do remember slogging through the main story of FGO. Like, I couldn't even get past the Nero storyline, and Nero is one of my favorite FGO characters. That's about the time when I uninstalled the game from my phone. As much as we complain about how much of a slog Elysian Realm core story is, at least in Elysian Realm, you get to decide when you want to press on and when you want to stop, right? It's not like one shot all the way through. I would have liked more mini bosses. Like at 39.5 or 39.4, they should have given us a major mini boss and let us use that particular character that was featured in this sub part, right? This sub arc, or this subsection. They should have let us use that main character, do a big fight, and that would have felt amazing. Same thing, right? Like, this subsection, we should have had a major battle rather than just a cinematic and that now all this dialogue. Oh, okay. They could have given us, like, some of the really weird, funky enemies. They could have pulled old boss model. Like, I would have been fine if they just randomly pulled Tonataya out of the abyss. We're in the Sea of Quantum Bubble universe anyways, right? They could have just pulled another Tonataya out of nowhere, and I would have been fine with that. But at least give us, like, something to fight with the demo characters that we get for this story. And make it so, like, again, after every 5 stages, just pull us out from the story, let players take a breather, like a soft checkpoint. Because this is basically a whole chapter's worth condensed into one part, right? One act 1. But traditionally, this is about as long as a traditional chapter. So having soft breakpoints makes sense. I think the lack of combat and the lack of natural intermissions is definitely my biggest complaint. Absolutely my biggest complaint with Chapter 39, Part 1. I think some of the cutscenes felt like, okay, this is almost worth it. Definitely the last cutscene of Part 1 was really good. But I feel like my appreciation of that cutscene, my immersion for that cutscene was definitely ruined by how long Part 1 turned out to be. And just the sloppy execution of, like, not having a good overall design, right? A good overall execution, balancing story with combat gameplay. I think about one of my friends who was always like, you know, I play these games for the gameplay. And, you know, yes, the story is there to be enjoyed, but there needs to be a balance of the two. And definitely there was not a balance. There was too much dialogue, exposition, and story without appropriate gameplay to match it. And you can definitely feel that as something that was apparent in chapter 37 and 38 in some level as well. It's a terrible feeling. Like, you play Honkai's story and you don't even get the sense that you're playing the game anymore. When I played these last few chapters, it reminded me of why I hated Genshin Story. In a way, yeah, I felt that too, right? Like, you just have to sit there and you either story skip everything to save time, or you have to mash your way through to skim everything. Like, I will make the comparison more towards Final Fantasy 16 because that's the main, you know, story-driven combat action RPG that we recently played on stream. 17 sessions, we finished the game. There were times in that game where I felt like the combat dragged out too long. But I felt like even in the scripted encounters, if they even had some of that in this chapter, it would have made for a more fulfilling experience. The worst part for me in chapter 39 part 1 was that we had characters basically get off-screened, right? Off-screen, unalived. Whether that's permanent or not, like, you know, whatever. But that made me so upset because that could have been a great opportunity to showcase that battle suit, have them square off against whatever long fight in a way that, you know, you can make the fight really easy, you can make the fight really hard, I don't care. But at least let us do some fighting instead of just dialogue. And I say that as somebody who already spends so many hours in this game, in the Endless Abyss and Memorial Arena over the last however many years. I don't mind that if it's an easy fight or not, but at least let us have that balanced mix of fighting with the dialogue. The fighting to make the dialogue mean something and vice versa. The dialogue to make the fight have a purpose. Yeah, there was so much text and info. Will all that matter much when we get out of the bubble universe and see if Quanta is like, okay, so yeah, exactly. It's too much lore dump, too much info dump without any weight. And the only way to give it weight was to maybe have some combat so that you actually feel the struggle up front. And vice versa, right? Like, when we grind in Abyss and Memorial Arena, there's no story or lore attached to that. So, like, we're grinding those modes for our own self-satisfaction. But in a story context, you know, having the lore support a fight gives that fight meaning, but we are robbed of that fight. A short fight between Veliona and the main antagonist would be nice. Like, I can sorta understand if they're like behind schedule, they don't have animations for the main antagonist, but like even in that sense, that's why I was, you know, referencing earlier on, like at least give us a bigger mini boss to square off. Like I said, they could just pull Pisacha out of nowhere and just like, I created another stronger entity for you to fight or something, like, or bring Tona back from the vault. Quantum whale. You know, they have so many random enemies that they could have us just like fight off against. The fight between Kiana and Mei is a great example. The fight between Kiana and Senti, oh, like both of those, right? Both of those were great examples, and in a lot of ways, like both of those fights is kind of how Final Fantasy 16 felt in a lot of ways, like especially towards the end. I got a little annoyed because, you know, it's the same problem I had with the Kevin fight back in chapter 35, where like you're trying to do your combos, but they keep interrupting your combo with scripted cutscenes. But even in that sense, like I felt like if we even had half of a scripted fight in part 1 of chapter 39, that would have brought me a little bit more satisfaction, you know? Well, I think Talok is officially unalived as of the Cyber Angel cutscene or tournament, so like I don't mind skipping that. I don't know, our tournament. I don't think that makes any difference whether or not engine update will get raids updated. I honestly don't care. I honestly don't care. Like, it could be something cool for armadas, but like in the end, it's just extra. It just becomes another chore to do. Oh, don't forget to do this every week. People are gonna find ways to min-max it, and then, you know, it'll suck the fun out of it. It becomes a min-max fest. Like, engine update is that's not gonna fix this. This is a design and execution issue. Yeah, this is a writing and design problem. And even with the writing, they, you know, like, yeah, they could condense a lot. I feel like the overall outline of the plot was fine. You know, it makes sense, but definitely too much fluff and filler. Like the whole setup of the plan in this part 1 was awesome, especially when, you know, a certain character's like, aha, you fell for the bait. But it took way too long to get to that point. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree with Nefer on that. I don't think it's a writing issue, it's just the execution. I felt like the overall outline was fine. I think that the volume of dialogue could be trimmed, but they definitely needed to balance all this, you know, dialogue and lore with just actual gameplay. Just let us hit things and press buttons. Just let me hit things and press buttons. So many unnecessary tangents and random explanations that never lead anywhere. That's fine. I feel like that's more food for the super lore-hungry crowd. So that can easily be chalked up as like we're not the core audience for that fluff. But I still feel like there was just too much of it. I think some of it is fine because that's more catering to a different audience that enjoys the story. I feel like it just has to be more balanced. And the only way to get it more balanced is to incorporate more fighting segments. They never build up anything. Well, a lot of it you could argue that like, you know, lore theorists, uh, it's more food for them to like, you know, they do their red thread charts for the MiHoYo long con, right? Because like when Vita popped up, all the lore junkies popped out of the woodwork and they were like, "That's the woman Sue that Sue mentioned in the Elysian realm." And I'm like, okay, cool. Sure. So Fractal says, totally honest, I don't think they do that for those people. You could be right, Fragile, but those are still the players that will eat up the fluff. Whether they do it intentionally or not. There's a lot of things when I look back at Honkai historically with the writing, I still feel like they were just making stuff up, you know, flying by the seat of their pants, so to speak, as a that you know, people will put up on a pedestal in terms of story writing. And even though I don't agree with it, that's still one way that, you know, some fans will engage with the media. And I'm not gonna sit here and say like, okay, they need to trim out everything. I think some of the, again, I still think some of the fluff is fine as long as it's balanced with gameplay. And I do agree, 6-week dev cycle doesn't allow for that, but I do also will give them some benefit of the doubt in to say like a lot of the outline for the overarching story plots have been figured out more or less in advance. There's a lot of stuff on the story side that they probably do have figured out. But then they just don't have time to execute it all the way they envision it because they're on a tight deadline. Oh, the 1.2 quest? Yeah, so the 1.2 quest line was really good. Um, the Yu Kong quest was also really good. And I agree, it would be nice if we had more focused storytelling, but you know what ends up happening is that with this current part 1.5, even though they say they're, you know, they're trying new things and they're less stressed than they were at the end of part 1, you do get that sense that, you know, they're trying to cram a lot of content, which is like, it's very evident in chapter 39 where you have a whole chapter's worth and this is only part 1, right? This is a whole chapter's worth of content and it's only part 1. So you still get that feeling like they're rushing to get to the end because there's just not enough time to put it all out. Anyways, that's my complaint. I don't mind the fluff. I think there was a lot of dialogue. I think the idea of the setup was really good. I think they could have trimmed a little bit of the dialogue. I think there needed to be more gameplay. More mini bosses and more natural section breaks. Like at the end of stage 5, at the end of stage 10, just like pull us out of the game for a little bit. Just pull us out from the storytelling so that there's like a natural pause. And then if the player wants to continue, go back in. seems like a very glaring symptom of mismanagement to me. I'm sure there's probably a lot of underlying, you know, factors. Too many chefs in the kitchen, etc. Too many different turning gears. I'm sure there, you know, if we dive into it, I'm sure there's many different parties to blame, etc. But we just get the end result. And that's kind of more my critique right now, is just the end result. And what I would like to see next time. Probably won't get fixed at the end of this chapter. Probably won't even get fixed in patch 6.9. But maybe 2 arcs down the road. I don't know. When we publish this video to YouTube, just make sure to pass it around, I guess. Yeah, not our problem to solve. But we can farm it for content. We can farm it for content. So, that's my critique of Chapter 39, Part 1. I wish it was better. I'm happy with the final ending of Part 1, but, you know, I definitely had a mixed experience with this. I felt like going into this arc, I definitely was more optimistic about Part 1.5. So, like, Chapter 36, I was very optimistic, especially during Parts 1 and 2 of Chapter 36. And then Chapter 37 was a blur to me. I think I forced myself to play through it. There were some funny moments, and then there were moments that I felt like just dragged way too long. The end of Chapter 38 felt like it was a redeeming quality. 38 Part 2 was kind of cool. Because that's when we had the Sage fight, right? 38 Part 2 was kind of cool. But 39 Part 1, this was very long, and a lot of it was just imbalanced. There was just that huge gameplay to dialogue imbalance, and I wish it was better. I wish it was better. So, next time, more fights, more mini-bosses, natural breakpoints at the subsection markers that, you know, bring us out, let us take a breath. If we want to keep going, we can keep going. or even if it doesn't even have to be pulling us out. Like, even if it was in the stage, it's just say, like, would you like to save and quit? Would you like to save and continue? You know, even if it was like a menu pop-up in-game, I think that would have been fine. I also agree on that remark. So Fragile comments in the chat, you know, the fact that the daily story event is locked behind completing the story makes less sense. Yes, especially when once you start the story, they expect you to stay the whole ride. But to start the daily, you only have to complete stage 2. That's super annoying. You know, back in earlier chapters, when on the release patch, when they had the dailies, you didn't always have to do that. You know, some of the older story dailies was like, you just start the daily, and the daily is its own self-contained story. And I feel like if they're gonna do these event dailies, they need to go back to that older tradition, where the dailies is its own side story, and you can start it separate from the main story. That's actually a huge, like, long-term gameplay critique, but it's a very important point to bring up. All right, I think that's all the real major points that I really want to cover on Chapter 39, Part 1. But I wanted to make a video about it, and I will, once we publish this, I will post it in the Honkai official Discord suggestions chat. Whether or not it goes anywhere, I don't care. But, you know, maybe if we can get enough of the community to like and upvote, or you know, make a fuss about it on the surveys, like maybe we can get something. Anyways, thanks all for listening to me rant and rave as a longtime story enjoyer, but not a story ultra invested ultra, but I would consider myself a core gamer on Honkai 3rd. You know, we play all the modes, we play all the story. I would definitely. I feel like my experience in this game is pretty well rounded enough to comment and critique on this. All right, now I gotta go do the dailies.